We are so honored to have Senator John Kerry is with us, and he will speak now. And we are thankful to all of you who are here. I would like to say about Dennis Kucinich too, how grateful our family is to him for his incredible support of us in so many different situations. Senator Kerry, thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to your work.
It's wonderful to be here with you. Yigal, thank you for the introduction. Great to be here with my friend Dennis. And Brad, thanks for those great comments. What a privilege to be able to share some thoughts with you. And I apologize for coming in late, and I apologize ahead of time for leaving early, but I have a meeting with our leader in about 6 minutes, and I'm going to be late to it anyway. So, but it's very special to be able to share some thoughts with all of you here today. We remember, obviously, that inimitable voice of Tom's, which reminded us so often about our obligations of conscience. And he repeatedly reminded us that the veneer of civilization is paper thin, and that we are its guardians. And we can never rest in that effort. And that's really, I think, the guideline for what is happening here today and what is behind this effort. It's a privilege for me to be able to say a few words about that effort because on so many occasions I got to see Tom living that and working it in so many different ways, sometimes with his family, which we all know was so profoundly important to him, from Annette, wife of 60 plus years, am I correct? Something like that. And of course, Annette and Katrina. He could never brag enough about all of them. And he didn't need to because they all spoke for themselves. But he, to really know Tom and understand his passion for what we're thinking about here today is to begin with that respect that he had for family, all the way down to every grandchild and down to, I guess, dogs, Gigi, Matsko, and so forth. But that was part of his humanity, and that's part of, that is really central to what guides us here today. Far too many people outside of this room, perhaps certainly outside the United States, but even in the United States, there are people who have difficulty understanding this. They just don't realize the global reality of anti-Semitism today. And too many people don't realize that we're sort of living in a period, we all know how difficult it is, but it's a period with a special witch's brew of negative, demeaning, destructive depictions of peoples and of individual people. And people are sort of stirring this pot of political grievances and economic troubles. And really, ever since the 1930s, we've seen this increase, if you will, of dangerous new openings for extremism, including in Tom Lantos' native Hungary, where just this past month, 1 out of every 6 votes cast in an election was cast for an openly anti-Semitic party. So just as Tom would have, we are reminded here today, and this effort demands that we reach out. That's what Tom did again and again against this cruel sting of bigotry anywhere in the world, anytime. And obviously history is full of these very painful reminders of how hatred left unchallenged translates into an act of hatred. Words of hatred become acts of violence. Hate speech, whether it's anti-Semitic or anti-gay or anti-black or anti-Islamic, all of it is the first step to incitement. And it could be the Hutu on Radio Mille Collines, or it can be a Nazi pamphleteer, or it could be a terrorist whispering in some young person's ear somewhere in the world. But if you listen carefully to history on the eve of the darkest chapters of history, you'll hear the voices that were teaching people to reject and teaching people to hate. I have never met a child, 2 years old, 2.5, who hates anybody. It's taught. And that's one of the great things that we need to prevent from happening. So this Lantos Anti-Semitism Holocaust Denial Archive, created by the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice and the Middle East Media Research Institute, is an attempt to call attention to the anti-Semitism across the Middle East and to tell people it's got to stop. Now, Tom Lantos understood something special about this. He understood that if you put a spotlight on things, then you have an ability to turn things around. In 2002, many of you may remember, Tom hosted a event in which he raised awareness about MEMRI's translation of a 41-part television series that was based on all of the worst stereotypes of Jewish people. And by the time Tom was through, the chief political advisor to the president of Egypt was publishing articles in main Egyptian newspapers denouncing anti-Semitic myths. That's what can happen when you stand up and push back. And that was Tom's voice, and this fight is the legacy to that. And it also, and I think we need to focus on this, it's not just important to the stopping of the particular incident, it's important to the building of the legitimacy of our Mideast diplomacy. Because just as anti-Semitism is the precursor to violence, combating it is essential to building the foundation to be able to make peace. Whether it's changing those textbooks or changing the television advertisements, you run through a whole series of things where people just lay a foundation for hatred rather than a foundation for peace, and a foundation for the continued belief in stereotypes that have no foundation in fact. It's interesting to note that over half the population of the Middle East is under the age of 25. And when you consider the fact that by 1967, 43 years ago, most Jews had left the Arab world. So Jewish communities in places like Baghdad and Damascus completely disappeared. That means that most Arabs in the Middle East have never met a Jew. So it's little wonder that a television commentator can recently say that Jewish doctors traveled from Israel to Haiti in order to harvest organs and sell them in the marketplace. This is what comes out of both the combination of ignorance and stereotype and hatred. So that's why we need to build on this. Tom Lantos understood that outrage has to be coupled with outreach. And he always attempted to do that, whether it was traveling to North Korea or to other difficult spots. I think he was the first person to go to Libya. And while he never got to Iran, and he would criticize Ahmadinejad for all the obvious reasons, he tried and tried and tried to be able to travel to Iran. So, this is a great effort because Tom understood that fighting anti-Semitism means you got to fight with those at your side who share your cause and share your conviction. And I hope that we can take this effort out. I think it's a marvelous initiative. I commend all those, and obviously Annette, you and Katrina and Annette have had a huge role in defining where the foundation itself would go. But MEMRI is to be commended for its continued efforts in joining in this. And we just have to remember that our friend Tom lived the lessons of his life better than anybody I've ever met. He saw government fail, and he went out and became part of government and delivered good government. He saw a failure of the human heart in the worst of ways, but his heart became stronger because of it, and he took those lessons out. And he was always influenced by, as we know, Raoul Wallenberg, who he undertook to make an honorary citizen of the United States of America. And I think it's fair to say that this kind of effort lives on in that light and in that great tradition. And I'm proud to be here to share thoughts about why this is so important. Thank you, Annette.